But 22 was just a hard year, figuring out this plan on my own. So again, I was a psych major in college with an emphasis in counseling and a minor in religion. So I obviously did not deviate very far from the path. But any psych majors in the room, you know you need a master's degree. So that was the next plan. So I started making plans for that, and honestly, the chair of our department, where my university was, he was just a huge advocate for me. He really was. He had fought to get me an interview with this grad program that was really competitive and accepted about 10 people a year. So it was a really sweet opportunity to get to apply with that program. I went out to visit, and on the way home, my mom went with me. On the way home, I'm trying to be incognito about it, but I just kind of start crying looking out the window. And my mom's like, Mindy, what's wrong? And I'm like, I'm so dumb, but I'm not at peace about this. And I know I should be so excited, but I don't think this is the right next step. And my mother, in all of her wisdom, just said, well, you're not making the decision today. We've got time. You can pray about it. We can look at other options. Calm down. I have a flair for the dramatic. I don't know if you know. So we prayed about that. On the way back, we passed these signs as we got close to Fort Worth, Texas for Southwestern Seminary. And growing up in ministry and the Bible Belt, I'd always heard of the seminary, but had never been to it. So we're like, oh, we should go check it out while we're here. So we drive to the seminary, we get out, and I'm just walking around, and I don't have these moments a lot in life, but it was just this general piece of this is where you need to be. And in my head, seminary was where the guys went to be prepared to become preachers. So I didn't really know what does that look like as a female. I knew that I was called to ministry, but had no idea what that would look like long term. And so I started walking around and was like, do I need to consider this? This feels odd. Went back, did research. They turned out to have a master's program exactly like what I wanted to do, because I knew that I wasn't done studying theology. So having the seminary core, but then they also had a counseling program that prepared for professional licensure. So went that route. Disappointed people at my university, to be honest, and really wrestled with, Lord, am I missing you here? Am I making the wrong decision? These are not the people that I want to disappoint. I trust their counsel. And, but just knew that was what the Lord had called me to do. So wrestled with that a lot. And so after graduation, had a series of, obviously, a lot of weddings to go to. And then moved to Fort Worth and started seminary. And the Lord was so kind, because I got to seminary and I seriously made wonderful friends the first day. And I really just appreciated God's kindness and provision in that, because people are important to me. We were all very poor, so we were just helping each other. I moved not having a job. School was the main priority. So really just trusting and hoping that the Lord would provide. And after being there for just a couple of weeks, on August 27th, I wrote in my journal. I'd started a new journal, and in it I wrote, Lord, I don't know who I am right now. Whoever I thought Mindy was, she is just not here. I feel very insecure. I feel very vulnerable. And I just don't really know what's going on. And I revisited this journal the other day because I wrote in it, I don't know what you're doing, but I do trust you. And I feel like there's a mountain in front of me, and even if I have to trek up it, barefoot and alone, I will, because I trust you. And whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well. The very next day, I get a phone call. I had gone to yet another wedding. And when I got out of the wedding, I had a voicemail from a lady in our hometown. And didn't have any other calls, but the voicemail just said, Mindy, it's Laura. Give me a call when you get a chance. It's about your dad. Bye. I'm like, okay. So I was like, that's bizarre. So I called Laura, and she said, have you talked to your mom? And I said, no, what's going on? And she said, well, your dad's had a heart attack. And my automatic response was, well, where's Scotty? That's my little brother. Because I knew that he was with my dad. I had had a phone conversation with my dad that morning. He had coached a doubleheader for my brother's baseball team, and then they had headed down south in Texas to watch a football game. And my automatic response, because I was a protective older sister, is, where's my brother? Because my automatic response for my dad was, he's fine. He was only 48. He was strong, this larger-than-life personality, very popular. He's just that presence. The person who walks into the room and they just own the room. That was my dad. So I really wasn't worried about him. I was like, people have heart attacks every day. If anybody's going to do that, he'll recover. He's okay. So got to the hospital, called my mom on the way down, and because we were coming from opposite directions. And she was like, oh, I didn't want to worry you because you were in Fort Worth by yourself, da-da-da-da. I was like, I'm actually only 30 minutes away from where this was actually happening. So college friends just get me to the hospital. I get there, and there was a sea of people that had come out from the football game just to be there for my dad, and not knowing what was going on. So I walk in, and when I get into the emergency room, doctors walk out and say, we're ready to talk to the family. Well, that's just me. They're not here yet. And they said, well, we really need to go ahead and update you. I said, okay. They're like, you're an adult. I'm getting 22. So I walk back with the doctors and sweet sister Joanna, because it was a Catholic hospital. And they share with me, they're like, your dad's had a heart attack, but honestly, we've put the stent in, and his heart's going to be okay. But your dad hasn't regained consciousness at all. He has so much swelling on the brain, and we don't know why, and we don't know what's going on, but he has no cognition. So he is brain dead, he is a vegetable, and we just have to wait. We don't know what's going to happen. And I was like, okay, this is serious, not what I was really expecting going into that situation. Long story short, we're in the hospital for several days, just waiting. Waiting for brain functioning to start again, waiting for some type of movement results. And that was just a hard season, but honestly, looking back, it was the time where I just felt the most intimate with the Lord and just his kindness and comfort. Because even though that was really scary, I remember my uncle coming up to me, who was like a second dad in a lot of ways, and he comes up, he goes, Mindy, it's okay to be mad at God right now. You can question him. And I just looked at him like he was stupid. I was like, I am not mad at God. He can do what he wants. It's just sad. I want my dad. My dad had been my best friend, spiritual leader in so many ways. And again, I just remember that just being like, God, I really do trust you here. I trust in your sovereignty, but this all looks very uncertain and very, very scary. And I don't know what to do, but it was also sweet to see so many people come to the hospital again. We're about 2.5 hours away from our hometown, and every day, literally, about 50 visitors would come in. Because my dad was a great minister of the gospel. Honestly, he probably loved the church better than he loved us in a lot of ways. I feel like the church got the best version of him. And some of you may be in families like that. But looking back, it's I love the testimony that he was able to have in the lives of other people, their kindness to us, the body just coming together for encouragement and support during that time. And I just remember being so impressed by the Lord's bigness in all of that and being able to just look at him like, this man is lifeless. Yet the Lord is still doing so much work. And I just remembered that it's not about us. It's about what God can do through us. And that was such a sweet testimony just to see men that my dad had been intentionally friends with that weren't walking with the Lord start praying again, start loving their families again through that situation. And I love that. And there was one day I was in the hospital. He was back in ICU. Again, there's no function. He had basic brainstem functioning. So if you tickled the bottom of his foot, he could lift his leg. But there's no cognition, nothing there. And one day I was in there, we're a singing family, and I'm just singing with my dad. My sister's in there with me. And I was holding my dad's hand, and I started singing It Is Well With My Soul again. And that first line of just, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well. And I was bawling, okay? And for the first time, though, I felt like I was really singing that with a lot of genuine heart behind it, okay? You have those moments where you're just I mean that, Lord. Whatever my lot, you have taught me to say. This whole last year has been unmet expectations. Way different than what I had ever anticipated. And so just in that moment, I feel a press on my hand, and I look up, and my dad has tears coming down his face. And of course, the doctors kind of write that off, the body just responds, and I'm like, I get that for sure. But for me, that was just a sweet moment of the Lord reminding me, Mindy, I'm here, and I've got this. And I had a sweet friend during that time. He was a guy, and he just folded up a piece of paper, because that's a dude card for you. And he wrote in it Psalm 62, and I've always just really clung to this verse. It was just really powerful during that time, but has become a life verse for me for so many different seasons. But Psalm 62, verses 5-8 says, For God alone, O my soul, wait in silence, for my hope is from him. He only is my rock and my salvation, my fortress, I shall not be shaken. On God rests my salvation and my glory, my mighty rock, my refuge is God. Trust in him at all times, O people. Pour out your heart before him, for God is a refuge for us. And in my life, and even through that, I've learned God is refuge. Because shortly after that, the doctors came to us and they said, you have a decision to make. He's not getting better. We can put a trach in, we can transport him back to your hometown, or we need to really consider taking him off life support. And that was just not a decision that you thought that you would have to make in a parent's life, for sure. And I was so glad that I came from a family of faith that, again, had the mentality of like throw you into the deep end of the pool, figure out how to swim, because it just created so much dependence on the Lord and on prayer. And I remember praying in that moment, like, Lord, we don't think that these decisions are fair or that we have the capacity to really make them. But I remember the Lord just pressing into my heart, there is nothing about God that is chaotic. Nothing about his character is chaos. Sin is, my fear is, anxiety is, but there's nothing about God that is chaos or really confusing. It may look confusing to us because it's not what we expect, but his character, his nature is not chaotic. And I remember telling my mom, like, Mom, God's not chaotic. I know that. I know he is good. I know he is trustworthy. I know he is always working for his good and for his purposes, even when it kind of goes against what I think would be right or fair or just better. And in this decision, I was like, we cloud all of that with our fears, our wants, our desires, but God's not chaotic. I truly believe that God prepares us. I truly believe, because God's word tells us to, that he goes before us. He goes before us and he protects us. He walks alongside us. He cares for us, and we have to trust that. So even in that decision, I was like, God, I'm going to trust you here, but I know that everything clouding my vision right now are my own fears. I want my dad. He's too young. What does this mean for our life? What does this mean for my mom? What does this mean for my little brother, my older sister? We didn't have all those answers, but I remember telling my mom, I believe God is preparing me to let him go. And I hate that. But I felt that it was true. And the Lord gave such comfort to our family that we all really believed that God is preparing us to let him go. So we did make the decision to take our dad off life support. And God was kind to us even in that, because he only breathed for a couple of seconds. And then he was with Jesus. And that funeral was honestly probably one of the favorite moments of my entire life. And I know that sounds very weird, okay? But in that funeral, we closed it with everyone singing. I mean, hundreds of people. There were just people like lining the back of the church in standing room only. And when everyone got up at the end to sing Victory in Jesus, it was the most amazing sound I've ever heard. And that was like the victory cry of my heart. It's like, God is still good, even when things look cloudy and even when things look hard. And I'm so thankful that the Lord has taught me that lesson, because when I'm talking to you, I get to say that in full confidence. And I love that. But it hasn't come without kind of walking through the muddy parts of life too. So even for me, at that point, I had obviously missed a lot of school, and I just had to quit. There was no way to recover the semester. Again, for the academic high achiever, let's get the show on the road, let's be efficient with your life and time and be very purposeful. That was a weird season for me, to go back to my hometown less than a year after I graduated, to work part-time, to not be in school. Every plan that I had had was just kind of turned upside down. And it was good. And that's what we have to remember. Nothing about God is confusing. You just have to trust. Okay? And honestly, even since that year, life has been really good. It's also come with a lot of uncertainty. I went back to school, don't worry. You heard that earlier. It was there waiting on me. Made a lot of good friends. Graduated. Got diagnosed with diabetes at the age of 27 with the juvenile kind, so I'm, again, super weird. So I got diagnosed. I was like, Lord, what is this? I was working part-time. I didn't have health insurance. Please be responsible with your life. It's not fun. It's an expensive disease. But when you're working part-time and that hits, you're just like, okay, Lord, I have to trust you with my finances. I have to trust you with school. I had just started this PhD program. I was like, this is hard. Literally, I need the Lord to care for me. And he did. One day I was at work. I worked in the admissions office at our school. John Wood walks in the door and says, Thomas White would like to talk to you. And I was like, oh, goodness. So I go back and Dr. White says, Mindy, I'd like to offer you a job. A full-time position, benefits and all. And I was like, oh, goodness. And part of what he said, and I will never forget, just in case you're wondering who your president is, he looked at me and said, "You have an opinion, and I want you to share it freely."